There's a lot of movies and books where you can tell that the characters are mostly there to be tormented and killed off. So I like to try to make characters that are really, really engaging. You don't have to like them, but you have to understand them. My name is Mats Strandberg and I'm a Swedish author, and I write horror, sci-fi and fantasy for children, for young adults and for grown-ups. Horror has always functioned as an escape. Like, your own problems doesn't seem so bad when you read about someone being chased by a killer clown. Good horror always deals with very real fears. Being afraid of losing control over yourself. It can be the fear of a loved one dying or getting sick. It can even be political fears. So I try to use as much of that as possible. What really connects my books is that I really want to explore what happens when the everyday life that we all know and accept. What happens when you bring something scary or supernatural into it? Like, who do we become when everything is turned upside down? I think those parts of horror novels are really the most interesting. You can ask really big questions about life and death and good and evil. When you write a horror novel, you don't have the luxury of scary music and jump cuts or jump scares. I really try to use the body as much as possible and focusing a lot about what your characters are going through and how they feel physically in the room they're at. What's the temperature like and what does it smell like, and where's the fear in their body? Like, is it their heart beating? Is it their skin is tingling? Or like, everything I can to sort of put the reader in the situation of the characters. Because it's usually quite unbelievable circumstances, right? So you have to sort of help the reader along to suspend disbelief as much as possible. Well, my psychologist said that it's great that I write horror because all my imagination that is so made for thinking up disasters and catastrophe, now I can finally use it for something creative. I think it's quite interesting in Sweden and our relationship to horror, because horror is quite frowned upon. We don't have the big classic horror stories like Dracula or Frankenstein. Or at least we don't think we do, because at the same time, Selma Lagerlöf, for instance, wrote amazing ghost stories, and Ingmar Bergman did some very, very terrifying horror movies. It's just that we don't think about them as horror, we just think about them as a Selma Lagerlöf story or an Ingmar Bergman movie. I think maybe Swedish horror is sort of where crime stories were 30 years ago, that it's finally getting some recognition, and I'm very happy about that. I think there's no age limit on horror. My children's books are as young as 5 years old. There's a lot of older ladies who really love my books, who were afraid to admit in the 80s that they loved Stephen King novels, and now they're finally out and proud as horror readers. So that's extra fun. I love both horror books and horror movies, but I think that when a horror book really works, you can't really beat it, because there's so much more space for the interior, what happens to characters. It's such an intimate feeling of reading a novel and giving you the space to really fill in your own blanks and make your own images. As much as I love horror movies, I would choose books if I had to.